I'm Bo Harwood, and I was a sound mixer and composer of A Woman Under the Influence. This first piece of music was basically recorded in the office and intended to be a temporary track. I thought most of the music in this film was going to be arranged and recorded in the studio, but John liked the innocence of the office recording. What I was going for was the simplicity of Peter, of his friends, having fun, camaraderie. And then it kind of falls into something that is, to me, is like kind of sweet, caring, almost a lullaby, which is how I felt about the Longhetti family and maybe about the relationship between all the workers.
Hey, hold it, fellas. Wait. Quiet now.
My name is Michael Ferris. My official credit on the film is camera operator. I believe in a woman. I share it with an old friend, Dave Knoll. But that doesn't really describe what we did. We really kind of ran the entire camera department for John, and that became a big job since we shot 1 million feet of film on this movie. We were all as green as grass. We were all just learning. I was trying to be a camera assistant. John tapped me to make the movie with him, and we went ahead and did that. And the opening sequence is meaningful to me because I remember very well that we were excited to be using zoom lenses. The trouble was we had to figure out how they worked, which we did, and got a lot of long lens and zoom stuff that we hadn't done before, but it seemed to work.
Forget about it. No way.
I was a fledgling at the time we did this sequence right here. I knew nothing about photography other than my stills. And you can see this is all pretty much low light and ambient, whatever's in the room. However, it works enormously, I think, for the story that he's telling and the grit and the style, which this film has come to reflect.
Oh, Tony, don't yell at the kids. I don't want anything to go wrong. Your mother's terribly nervous. Get in the car, wrong. Come on, Maria.
Please, don't yell. Everybody takes it out.
Maria, get in that car.
I remember this day really well. I'd never done a sound before in a film. I barely knew what it entailed. I had a guy working with me, Nick Spalding, who was my boom operator, who really pretty much carried me at least through the first half. He'd done some mixing before, and so that was a big help. But this scene right here, it's listening to it, it's incredible that, I really did pretty damn good. It's a large area. I've got the kids to worry about. I've got Gena's mother. I've got Gena, and running back and forth. And I remember that I think I used some wireless microphones on Gena and Lady, and I had mics planted in the bushes, up on the porch, by the car, and a boom operator. And I remember when everybody went to lunch, I stayed and I was planting mics. I was running around like crazy. And again, I didn't have anything to go on other than instinct, Nobody was really telling me what to do, not really. I remember this is probably one of the first things that I did as a sound man that I felt so good about that I pulled it off. John came up to me afterwards, and I just had a big grin on my face. And he said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "It was great. It was great." This was probably the first major achievement I had as a sound mixer.
Not calling.
Oh, darling, I can take care of it.
I don't want your...
Photographically, we shot a couple of wide shots to establish the general area that we were in, but then we wanted close shots, and we shot a lot of this close. But if you look at the operating, today with experience, we keep people in the frame in a certain part, and we try to do it clearly and with a certain compositional order. But in this film, we were learning as we went. We were happy to keep them in the frame in the beginning. But it didn't take us very long to begin to learn just to watch the actors and see what they were doing. This shot Today, for instance, we'd never let her go out of frame or edge the frame like that. We'd move the camera, but it's really kind of nice that it doesn't move. Again, you can see all of this is pretty much ambient light. It's whatever the daylight is. Regular Hollywood film, you'd light this interior the way you wanted it. We did light this. We put photo floods in a lot of the overheads and in the living room in the lamps that you saw, but that was pretty much the extent of it. And we just were able to move at will where we wanted and follow whatever the action was, because we didn't always know where they were going to go, and we didn't rehearse in such a way that we rehearsed for camera. We learned to rehearse with the actors as they did it. And John would sometimes look at us. Everyone thought we were rehearsing. He'd just make the motion to shoot, and we'd start shooting it.
Yeah, we just start rolling. And Mike, did you even know what marks were? But
no, I didn't know what marks were, nor did I. You could have explained them to me, and I don't think I could have figured them out.
Right.
But that gives a fluidity and a reality, I think, to John's films that you don't see anywhere else. Documentary feel, because, you know, we're learning as much about what they're doing as they are.
Which I think was one of the major goals that John had. He worked very hard at putting us all, I think, on unfamiliar territory, and watched everybody squirm.
Now, this was a sequence, we had Haskell Wexler here photographing some of this, along with the rest of us. He had joined, he knew John, and had come along to help out and spent a day or two with us. And it was amazing to us to be around Haskell. We watched and we listened, and we also shot our own cameras.
Well, it was thrilling because it wasn't that long ago that he'd just done medium cool, right?
1969, and we're doing this in 72, 73.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got something on his mind now. Why don't you go? I want to talk to him.
Okay. But if you need a good ear.
Right, thanks.
I remember personally, I was not so involved with the technical aspects that I would be today as a professional. For instance, that you got good light on their faces, that you saw them all the time, that there was light in their eyes, you know, that there was contrast in the background. I was just kind of emotionally involved watching them act.
Sensitive woman. Mabel's not crazy. She's unusual. She's not crazy, so don't say she's crazy. This woman cooks, sews, makes the bed, washes the bathroom. What the hell is crazy about that? I don't understand what she's doing. I admit.
This is an old stunt man. I say old because he had been working his whole career in westerns and gangster pictures. Charles Horvath. And I don't know how he came to be in John's movie, but he's great. He played his part just perfectly.
Burn down a house. Jesus Christ, I don't know what she can do.
There's one thing that this scene reminded me of, is that in the background you can hear guys talking and yelling and stuff. Over the years I've learned that you get wild track and you add that, but I didn't know better. And also what we would do is we would shoot a scene like this with all these men, and I would not tell them to shut up. In other words, they were doing their stuff when we were shooting the dialogue. And so I just was trying to dig the dialogue out of their noise. You know, maybe I asked them to not be too loud or something, but also that enabled the actors to, I think, be in a more realistic set, you know. And it was, for me, it was completely by accident. I didn't know better. But looking back on it, that was one of John's things. It created a reality.
All right, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Okay, sweetheart.
So we mentioned that Haskell Wexler was helping us with the exteriors here in this construction fiasco scene. And it's appropriate time to mention that Caleb Deschanel was the DP of the show for the first 2 to 3 weeks. And he had a contribution to be made in a lot of the early footage. His relationship with John did not pan out toward the end of those 3 weeks, but he did contribute. He was part of AFI, and he came with AFI.
This was one of the sub-themes of A Woman Under the Influence, Gena's theme, or the love theme. My voice is implied orchestration. And I had about 3 or 4 different movements.
This sequence that we're looking at now, Caleb shot, the bar sequence, I believe coming back in the street, all that stuff. Memory doesn't serve as well as he probably deserves, but this I do remember.
I remember this was day 1 of the shoot, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I had to go for a walk before we started shooting, as I was about to lose my my dinner.
Well, sometimes it works that way, and sometimes it doesn't.
Also, the bar reminds me that the ambience inside, that's as it was. We didn't ask them to mime or to even lower their voices, really. I didn't know any better. So my job was on day 1, it was terrifying, was trying to dig the dialogue out of everybody talking here.
You know, Nick stood me up tonight. After I got the kids over at my mother's and everything.
Sounds pretty good, Bo.
Well, yeah, it's when it was all over. At the end of the evening, I was elated that I could just understand the dialogue that I'd gotten through the first day.
Sure, I just got paid. I'm loaded. What's your pleasure?
Seagrams.
Seagrams is what?
7 crowns.
John knew that I desired to learn camera, and I was, in the process of becoming an assistant cameraman, and that's what I wanted to do. And he made it clear that I was going to get that opportunity. And he proved it time and time again, even when things get difficult. And after Caleb left, he looked at me and he said, "You and I are going to shoot the rest of this movie." And we proceeded to do so. And, he just didn't know we couldn't do anything. So we did.
That was fantastic. That was a great day. Never forget the look on your face, Mike.
Well, it was a bit of a drama. Mm-hmm. And I remember that Cliff Cornell was coming out of the Taft house. He said, "John, Paul want to see you." Paul Donnelly, the producer, went upstairs, and John said, "Well, the AFI guys aren't with us anymore, and made some changes, and you and I are going to shoot the rest of this movie." And I said, "Yes, sir." But I walked out of there in a daze, but immediately began to think who I could get to begin to help us. And I called my friend Les Otis, who was a camera assistant with some experience, and we began to put together a group of people who could do the job. But I think it's also important to mention that there was an interim of about a week where John's friends from union cameramen and assistants, operators came in for a day here and there and tried to kind of get us off to a good start, get us on our feet. And that lasted about a week. The union came in and prevented them from working. It was a non-union show.
In those days, it wasn't cool to be non-union. They were pretty rough on us.
Yeah, I mean, the union has a procedure. They fine you $500 a day for working non-union, and it was not done. But the point is that these people loved John to the extent that they took that risk, and as soon as the union showed up, they had to move on. But it was a good time. I learned from a lot of people within that week, and we just after that It was John and I and the group that we put together, Les and Dave Knoll, and we just kind of just kept going, and we learned as we went, and we learned fast.
$3.50. Good luck. Sure.
Are you all right, sweetheart?
It's worth mentioning that John had kind of a psychology wherein he brought everybody together, and we all went to work on the house. We cleaned it. We took out old furniture. We took up the rugs. We painted. I mean, we made that house into the set that we photographed.
Jeez, that place was grungy too. I mean, it smelled. It was like there was some really elderly people that lived there, and the cats and the dogs that they'd had over the years left samples all over the house, and all of us were on our hands and knees scrubbing and varnishing and painting. Right? I mean, even John.
Yeah, and this includes actors as well. Cliff Cornell, I've got photographs of him. Obviously, you know, everybody pitched in, and I always thought that it was part of John's understanding of human nature that by the time we were done with that, 5 weeks later, whatever it was, he kind of knew everybody, and we were a group. We were a family.
Were the AFI people involved with the house cleaning thing?
The specific crew that we met later was not there. They came on the first day of shooting.
I don't remember them being around when we were actually putting all that together and cleaning the house, making it a place to live and shoot in.
No, you were right. They weren't there, but they came when we began to shoot. I don't know the circumstances.
Yeah, I'd like to mention, too, that there was a wonderful human being, Mitchell Bright, that was kind of in a gopher role, I want to say. I think he was from was it Virginia Beach, and he hadn't been out here for a very long time. And he was kind of one of the, I guess, he was like in gopher position, wasn't he? Or kind of low man on the totem pole with the camera department or something. And when Caleb's crew left, he was kind of encouraging everybody to go with him. And I remember the dilemma Mitchell had, and we encouraged him to stay. And another wonderful turnaround was the fact that John asked him to, I guess his title was in charge of lighting. So he went from, taking out the garbage with the rest of us to being in charge of the lighting. So really, you and Mitchell and we're sort of in charge. We're like dual DPs. I kind of saw it that way, right?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, but it's very important to understand that the structure in Hollywood, which is, somebody loads the film, there's a second assistant who claps the boards, there's a first assistant who does focus and runs camera, and then there's operators and DPs, second unit DPs, all that didn't exist. It was us. It was me behind the camera, it was Dave Knoll, it was John, and then below that, other people fell into line to support. And it was really John's desire that everybody be a part of it. He did not like the stricture of individual lines of working, although he understood the necessity for it.
Okay, as long as the shower's running, then you're all right. At least I hope you're all right.
It's been inquired of us what John and Gena were like on the set, professionally and otherwise. And Bo, you tell me if I'm wrong in this, but I knew them personally and professionally, and I couldn't see a difference. As a matter of fact, I was always amazed at how, cameras would start rolling and Gena would turn into Mabel Longhetti. Cameras would stop rolling and she was Gena.
Yeah.
And John was always, his way of doing things was pretty much one way. Now, John could perform behind the camera in the sense that, if he had to do a little acting to create a mood or get an energy where he wanted it, he was very good at doing that. And anyone conversant with his career knows how good he was as an actor. But, you know, as time goes on in his film, there are one or two things that I remember how tough he was on her when she would ask him specific questions about characterization. That's something he would not allow or respond to. He wanted that coming out of each and every person on the screen. So I didn't see, I didn't see big, what I would call a professional relationship. Certainly professional was a lot of respect both ways, but there were times when they were very much like any family. I mean, there were fights on the set in the sense that they were verbal arguments about the way that you should do things. But these only came toward the end, the climactic sequences where everybody was under a certain level of tension. It was so organic. I remember that when we get there, I'll discuss it again. I remember one event that occurred that was just seemed so natural that it happened then because of everything that was going on in their lives.
There really was very little difference between John and Gena as husband and wife off the set, at their house, and when they were on the set. It's just that I never knew exactly. When John was on the set, it was like he was on. You know, I never knew what was coming next. I think John's main job was to get everybody on a piece of ground that was, as I said earlier, not only unfamiliar, but honest. In other words, let go of what you think this is. Let go of the way you think this is supposed to be done. And he did that with everybody. He did that with the crew. He did that with sound. He did that with the actors. He did that with music. Just let go of what you think the right way is. And I think his main job was to trick or manipulate anybody who was stuck in doing something that they were taught, or they wouldn't move off a safe ground. John was sometimes brutal in moving somebody off that territory.
Yeah, but he wanted them, if they were trying to be secure, he didn't want them secure.
No.
He wanted them human and frail and insecure if that's where they belonged. And he was brutal about that.
Yeah, he said once, I hate it when everybody's being careful. The creativity goes right out the window.
Did you eat?
No.
Oh, Nick, you must be starving.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hello. I'll get some.
You know, anybody who's studied any art, you know, when you've practiced it long enough, you get to the point where you don't think about doing it, you just feel it. And that's what he was looking for. And to do that with professionals and amateurs intermixed, it's going to be tough. And he was always working at it. But, you know, certainly at this stage of my knowing John Cassavetes, I had no idea what he was doing. That came on Chinese Bookie, opening night. I began to see his methodology much more clearly because I had matured and understood, and I'd been with him for years.
Well, me too, but every time I thought I understood where he was going with something, he would, throw me a curve.
Well, yeah, well, he could do that.
He kept me off balance. He kept me on my toes a lot.
For, everybody, there's Mabel for everybody.
Hi, Mabel.
Hi.
It's funny because we're all so different, but once I became part of John's family and I could sense and feel that, I just, I was just happy and hardworking and just absorbing everything in sight. And doing that unconsciously, I'm sure, but as time went on, I began to realize just exactly what he was teaching all of us.
All right, that's enough. Lance, come on.
Hello, Mabel.
Hello, Bowman. How are you there? Okay.
I mean, as a camera operator, I was just happy to keep them in frame on this film. Now, that's the first weeks. After the first weeks, I began to get the feeling and idea of it because all I had needed was opportunity. But as you work in the business, and I've done a lot of movies over the years, you begin to realize that when you do less and you think about what you have to do, it just flows. That's all John was looking for. He wanted to keep people from thinking. He wanted to help them to feel. And he found ways to do it that I think were amazing.
Get out of here and let me do some work.
Oh, okay.
Eddie, cut that out, Eddie!
You want spaghetti?
Spaghetti again?
Yes.
I love watching this kitchen sequence here, Mike. Does this remind you of our lunches? I mean, this is what we did. This is how we ate. The crew ate. We went out in the kitchen and we cooked up spaghetti. And,
That's right.
I mean, that's most of the time, that's really all we could afford.
If you were to pick one word besides love, and it's really the same word, to represent being with John all these years, it's family. And that's what he created. He was, he was just, he was a brother, substitute father. He was everything.
It was first and foremost the family.
And he would play on the set and be serious in equal amounts throughout the day and throughout the weeks and over the period of the show. We had been seeing Peter Falk for years, and when you met him, he was so down to earth and so much a part of the crew. He was very focused on his job, that I'll say, but he had time for people. And he was just kind of a giving, good guy. And you could see the friendship between him and John was very close. But everybody at this table had a special contribution. Finnegan, down there to the left of Gena, had been in a number of John's shows and was an old New York buddy. And he was a great character. He was just funny, and he was always poking ribs. Cliff Cornell became a personal friend. He's the good-looking guy in the denim right there with the dark hair. Finnegan, of course. Finnegan was fun to watch because he was a good actor, and as were they all. But he had points at which you'd have to tease him, or he would tease you. Gena was, I had been watching films all my life, and I had known Gena's career. But she was amazing to watch because when the camera started, she became Mabel Longetti in a way that you had to kind of really spend time looking at her and realizing she was no longer Gena Rowlands. Vince Barbie up there on the right, I think I'd done a low-budget movie with him prior to this, and he remembered me. And he was just a funny guy who was just thrilled to be there. And a lot of them felt that way. They were just glad to be in a John Cassavetes movie where they could really contribute, and they all did. And a lot of the stuff that they did was off the top of their heads along with the dialogue. They just added little bits and pieces, as you'll see.
Maybe a little more sauce, boys. Give me the sauce.
This was like you shooting with no marks. I mean, it was a huge scene with a lot of people talking, 2 cameras going. So for me, it was quite a challenge. And I had some mics planted on the table. I had something in front of Gena, I remember. I had Nick Spalding, of course, on boom. Mitchell Bright, for a while, our lighting guy, was also booming. I just had to... I was seating my pants. I mean, I guess the way I've done a lot of things in my life, but certainly here. I just I knew generally what each camera was looking at. And I had to make sure that I was recording those people that were on camera and everybody off camera at the same time, but leaning on who was on camera. Trying to figure out who was on camera with the cameras shifting around like this. So it was very difficult. It turned out all right. It turned out all right, but it was tough. It was really tough.
Morton. Joseph.
You know, and I can't watch it now without being back there. And
I think I fell in love with Gena.
well, we all love Gena.
In this sequence, though.
Yeah. No, this sequence is very special, and it begins to tell you who Gena is, who Mabel Longetti is, that she's not your everyday person, that she is loving, but she expresses it in a unique way. I always thought people should be more like her, but, these actors were all great, knew them to, to come in and put their hearts and souls in this. Hugh had been, of course, especially in Shadows.
Tidrow.
Tidrow.
Right.
Right.
And they call me Mighty Mouse. Mickey Mouse.
The actor eating spaghetti on the right, it's his daughter who plays the daughter of Nick and Mabel. She was a little cut up, not easy on John or anybody else. She ran around the house and really had to be worked to get her to do her scenes. You'll see her every now and then, just kind of looking around. But John never gave up on her, and she paid dividends, I think, because she just fit right in there somehow.
Aren't you going to ask where the kids are?
There's something about the spaghetti, the fact that we ate spaghetti. I mean, that was one of our lunches during this sequence and after.
I think it's our only lunch, wasn't it?
Well, I remember...
We had some Greek food every now and then.
Yeah, the things like that, those details are gone. I don't remember what we ate for lunch all the time. I just remember these faces and experiences. It's funny. It's selective, but it's funny.
I got Robert. I got William. I got Mary.
But I have always remembered this dialogue of Peter's about, you look around and there are no baby carriages. And, I mean, there's just something so unique and funny and silly about that. And because he delivers it in such an absolutely believing, deadpan manner, you don't question the logic. You sort of go with it.
All up and down the street, all up and down. Little kids, baby carriages, kids crawling. What is that when there's a lot of kids? Is that in the air?
Yeah, somewhere.
No, I mean, you go 8, 9 months, you know.
There's a tendency for Gena's performance to overshadow everybody, but Peter was just lockstep with her. And his character is maybe not the person she is, and also a standard of what civilization expects, and he brings, the hammer down on her. But at the same time, as a performer, he was essential. That relationship is everything. And as crass or as seemingly unloving his behavior is when he sends her, that's the conflict in all human relationships, because there's no question that he loves Gena, Mabel Longetti, but he just doesn't know what's right. And how John came and found that has always amazed me, and how he put these people together is just stunning.
You can go 8, 9 months. You won't see a kid. A couple of years go by. No, I never see a kid. A couple of years, all of a sudden, I see a lot of baby carriages, a lot of babies.
A couple of them got to be mine.
No, I think that's in the air.
Well, that be,
No, think back 9 months ago. There has to be some romance going on.
Oh, yeah.
Well, something's happened.
It wasn't me.
Peter was so into the story right here.
I know.
Going,
But look at it.
what is he talking about? But then the main thing was I just remember sitting there going like, my God, look what's going on here. Watching Mabel start to turn and watching him go from this incredible love back and forth to like a fear of not knowing what to do when she started just really being herself.
It's, you know what, Bo, it's the trouble all people have. It's when you're in your own home with your own eccentricities, you be whatever you want. But when you're in a group, you have expectations, they're put on you. You have them of yourself, and you expect them of those around you. And so he could not, he could not be in this group of men and handle her behavior when it became the slightest bit affectionate or maybe, in his eyes, too intimate. Yeah. These guys were just a special group. And this sequence is the sequence I remember the most because it was the one where I saw Gena really take off. And I'm assuming that there hadn't been that much where she had, she had really started to perform her eccentricities. But in this sequence, she did. And I was at the camera down at the end where Peter was, photographing her. And I remember consciously thinking to myself, gee, this is an extraordinary performance. This is Academy Award material. Whatever standard you use to say, this is so far above average, I got to find new words. And that was where she just began to freeze you with her ability, her incredible talent.
Okay, now a song from you, Billy Tidrow.
Nah, I can't sing. I can't sing a note.
Well, come on and dance it. Anybody can dance.
Nah, that ain't too cool.
I love
Well, sometimes John was very specific, like this shot was set up for Peter right here. But other times he'd just say, wing it, go where you think, go with your feelings. So he knew when he needed specific information, and times when he just wanted to see what flowed, be it the camera or I'm presuming the sound. And
well, that's true. John, one thing John really, as fun as he was on set and as loving as he was, he really, I think the one thing he demanded was everybody's attention. I mean, and involvement.
Yeah.
If a grip or even a gopher or a camera person wasn't really involved with what we were doing, and I mean the meat of the scene, on an emotional level, he really wasn't very interested in you.
No, and that's something.
By your involvement, you would figure out, if you knew what was going on emotionally and physically, you would figure out a way to pull off your task.
He expected people to be as involved as he was, and if you weren't, that was trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, but you know what? People were. There was, it's not, you didn't have to ask for quiet on that set. It just was there. When John spoke, we listened, and there was just a lot of focus on what we were doing and what had to be. And as many movies as you work on now, that's one of the main jobs as ADs is to keep order and keep people focused. But that just never came up on these movies. Everybody was they showed up that way.
Every once in a blue moon, some actors or somebody didn't do their homework or they didn't learn their lines, and that insulted him, really.
Yeah, it was rare, but when it happened, it was not the best way to see John.
No, it was like pretty much, how dare you, right?
Yep. And he's right. I mean, there's no question the energy put into all this, especially by him, but everybody. And it just had to be something that you were going to be part of, or you didn't belong there.
Ma, did you eat something bad? You ate fish? You ate fish in a restaurant? What restaurant? You ate fish in Hamburger Heaven. What did you do that for, Ma?
Thank you for the dinner, Mabel. It was very nice.
You're just like a baby, you know that? Look, I'll be over.
Hey, Nick,
I'm coming over. I'll be right
Thanks
over.
for everything.
You want Mabel? Huh? All right, I'll be over.
When I first met John, we just finished doing the music on this Fellini-esque film called The Bach Train. And John and Ben and Peter were invited to a rough screening of that, and they were near the end of editing Husbands, and we were showing it over at Universal. After the screening was over, John came up to me and he said, I didn't understand your movie at all, but I love the freedom, I love the dynamics of it, and basically asked me if I wanted a job. What he really had in mind was a sound editor, which was really fun for me because there were some sequences in Husbands that were shot MOS, that's without sound, and he had all this wild track, and I'm not going to say which sequences, but there were some scenes that it was fun. I literally got to bring life to scenes that were shot without sound by just cutting a whole lot of wild track together and making that work. So I got to use all the editing tools like the Moviola and the butt splicers and the rewinds and all that stuff. I got pretty good at that stuff after about a year or so.
I'm a warm person.
I know that.
I'm not one of those stiffs that you like. With their noses up in the air. And boom, boom, with their noses up in the air.
John loved working late. I mean, when he was involved in a film, it was his life. And I take my hat off to Gena because a lot of his time was spent in the cutting room. And if the editors had to go home to their wives or whatever, he would find somebody like me who could sit behind the Moviola with him till all hours in the morning and edit, try new cuts on certain sequences, which I loved doing anything with John. It was a complete honor for me to be sitting next to John till 4 a.m. in the morning, laughing and trying out ideas and just working with the old guy,
This monkey don't know what to do. He thinks you mean something. He don't know you don't mean it. I don't mind you being lunatic. Not lunatic.
We spent about 2 years, a little under 2 years, editing Woman Under the Influence. John was the first resident director that the American Film Institute had. I guess he was the first invite, and with him came all of us. So it was an interesting combination of kind of upper crust film school world and Faces International Films, which is all of us. They gave us wonderful editing rooms and production offices, and I had a little music room there. But again, that was almost 2 years at all hours in the morning. Sometimes we'd come in when the place was closed down, and we got to know the security guard really well, who was also a projectionist. So after everybody went home, we'd all kind of bring life back to the Institute, fire up the projection rooms, and at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe watch an old Joel McCrea movie, or maybe a new cut of Woman Under the Influence on this incredible 18-acre estate in the hills of Beverly Hills. Later on, after I started writing and recording more of the music, I took it upon myself to also edit the music in. So it was fun for me because I got to play with the sound and the music. Any sound that was surrounding my music, I got to, edit and alter. So John sort of taught me how to be somewhat of an editor. Under John, I got to be a composer. I got to be a sound mixer. I got to work a little bit as an editor. This is the thing that I always had a problem with, and a lot of people disagree with me, is I went toe-to-toe with John on a lot of stuff. John's films on one level are definitely, flawed. There's some people who maybe aren't great actors, or, the sound is rough, or this is out of focus or something, but there's something that you get after you watch any of John's films that suck you right in the gut. The fact that he wasn't being careful, that if something worked for him, or he liked Lady in this thing, or he liked this waitress over here, he just tell her, you want to be in my movie? And we're looking at him like, she can't, what are you talking about? She can barely put two words together. But there was something that he'd see in that person, and he'd go with it. He wouldn't listen to any of us. He'd just go with it. Now, I think the end result was that you ended up with a project that just absolutely knocked you over. That, in other words, if he, like I said before, if he was being careful, the film dynamic would have changed.
Come in, I'll shut that door. Oh, Nick.
I don't remember when I realized that Lady Rowlands was Gena's mother. I don't think it was right away. I never saw her name. I just saw her presence. But then it became clear to me that she was, and she was, I don't know, you could see where the class came from, where Gena was concerned. You know, was it Gena's brother, David? Mm-hmm. He's acted in some of John's films, and you know, they're not people who have acting experience, in my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And they are so perfect.
Where are the kids?
Upstairs.
Why are they upstairs?
Books. He had to come back. Tony had to have his book.
Didn't we take all of that last night? We piled the whole car full of everything.
But we have this discussion in the living room because I'm trying to get some sleep. No offense, but I really like to get some sleep.
All of the stuff that I disagreed with, you know, some of the music cues that were rough and that make me break out in a cold sweat, or somebody's acting ability, you know, that's less than perfect. He would go with that, and something resulted.
You didn't agree with him, but he agreed with him, so he kept at it. And when you see the sum of the parts, you know, when you see the whole, I mean, you recognize his genius, or, you know, I don't even like the word for John, just his humanity, his extraordinary sensibility, his desire to dig in and see how people love each other.
And his courage to go with his feeling and his sense of love. He wouldn't listen to me. He wouldn't listen to him. He wouldn't, you know, he would go with his gut, something that he fell in love with about this person or a scene, and he'd just go with it. And he'd look at you and nod and smile and say, oh, I understand what you're saying, but don't you just love it?
He was great that way. He really was.
All right, kids, back in bed. All you kids, back in bed. Back up here. All together now. Come on. All together again. Jingle bells. No good whistling. Just air. Just air.
This sequence I've never, ever gotten out of my mind. I forget it, but then when I see it again, I remember that I've never in the history of movies ever seen a scene where they bring the kids onto the bed and then they bring the mother-in-law onto the bed. And it was just so John to do that.
Oh, Lady hated it. She hated it. John, couldn't I just stand here? It's she was just that. She was a lady, and that's certainly where Gena came from. But I remember when they pulled her onto that bed, she was so uncomfortable.
John wanted to deflate any dignity or too much of it, or who knows why. It just was a wonderful scene. And I mean, wherever else did you see this in a movie? The way I always talk about John Cassavetes movies is I saw things there I never saw anywhere else, except maybe occasionally in real life, but very different. He was either stubborn to the extent that if it was his idea, he was sticking with it, or he just plain in his gut knew he was right and he was sticking with it. Doesn't matter, because if you're a fan of John Cassavetes and I think, you have to be. He always got it right. I mean, there's no film of his that I have seen that didn't have uniqueness to it.
I know, but what makes me really crazy is that in all of his films, there's stuff that I would have never let happen, that I disagree with or that I don't like. And if I talked to him about it, he would say, well, you know what, but she has this, or she did that, or don't you think it's marvelous the way she just walked in the room and went over and held out her hand to this guy, There would be some little piece of magic that maybe only John knew about, and that would be the only thing that he'd fly with, and that made everything valid to him, and everybody else in the room could think it's terrible, and it didn't work. But when the film was done, there was something there that resulted, that kicked you in the gut and made it a John Cassavetes movie. Mm-hmm. It still bothers me. The stuff that bothers me then bothers me now, but when I see the whole thing together, it's magnificent.
Why do you keep asking me that? You think there's something wrong with me or something? Think I'm wacko or something? Boy, I can hardly wait for the kids to come home. All of a sudden, I miss everyone.
This sequence to me that we've just seen is a comedy. You get to know both of them. You see their love. You bring in the mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law is classically a conflicting, character in lots of stories because of, for the obvious reasons. But in John's movie, she just she was kind of slightly befuddled around them grandmother who loved her kids and loved her daughter, and but it was so original that you'd never seen it before. Mm-hmm. And this scene, this is the beginning of the build of understanding that Mabel is singularly different.
Right.
And you know what? You look at those women compared to the way that Gena's dressed as Mabel, and we think those things, but we don't say them. These women are clearly upper class and not in the world she's in. All she wants is the time of day. Right. And you can't give it to her.
She's like John. She's got blinders on with the love of her kids. That's all that's important to her, right? Right here. I remember when John asked me to come up with something one evening. He wanted to lay in for a screening to show a sense of joy and excitement where kids pull up in the bus. So I just sat on the piano and guitar and did something, again, a temp track, something to just lay in. And as I did this, it's basically simple. It's just this linear guitar rhythm and piano note that kind of goes into a simplistic main theme at the end. But it kind of lays underneath her excitement and her joy of seeing the kids after school.
And because there is not a lot of music, when that comes up, it really creates a sense of her joy. That music just touches us so we feel this even more.
Thank you.
A woman under the influence.
I hope you kids never...
Our operating was improving in here. We were moving along in the story, and we were kind of learning just to go with it. I only think of that because you see a lot of stuff in here where you're searching to find the composition, and takes a little bit of time to do it, but you get there. Now it's a little sharper. They land on the stairs, and then she drops down, and the camera goes down with her and stops when she stops. So, but she, like we missed when she moves up. Today, I would ask an actor to take a little off that move when I'm this tight. Can you just, take a little off it, slow it down? Because the camera can't really follow as quickly as people really move. But I wouldn't dream. I mean, I didn't know enough then. And you have to this day, be careful about it because you don't want to interfere with what they're doing. But a lot of actors can handle mechanical as well as emotional business. I mean, the British are incredible at it. And so there's a collaboration, they help you. But here, you're just kind of exploring. And the hand, down to the hand, up to the kids, it's just a natural way to flow. And, we're just feeling this. John isn't instructing us.
I love
but you
this.
know what's going on.
I love this, though, Mike, because your operating is just so fantastic. And this is like the beginning, the project that we did a few years together. I was so mesmerized by, you knew what the actor was going to do on a little black and white movie we did before the actors did. I remember when I showed the film to Yvonne Posser, he thought your camera operating was the best he had ever seen. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Following people and knowing when an actor's going to go up, down, and stay down and come up, you just had a sense.
Well,
and this is the early stages of it.
This is the beginning.
Yeah.
Not the early stages.
Right.
I had never to really, with any consistency or continuity, operated a camera like this. So, I was certainly learning, but I was eager to learn. And, when someone gives you opportunity, you either don't believe it or you just lose all fear and go with it. And that was a choice I made. And it was easy to make. Because John took all of that, all the concern about, what other people think and how you perform, just toss out the window. Right. You knew you could make mistakes. And because of that, you went with feelings instead of anything else.
Right.
And he knew that was the way to get you to do your best. But how he knew is always the mystery.
That's a very key thing, that we were allowed to make mistakes. Because I think it was this sequence in here, I realized that I had recorded over the earlier morning's stuff, it just was it was terrifying. And I remember having to go to John and saying, John, I need to go back and listen, but I just realized that, I guess I flipped over a tape or something, but I wasn't paying attention, and when I reloaded, and he just took a deep breath and thought for a moment and patted me on the shoulder. And when I said, okay, listen, we got to go back and, we had to reshoot about at least 2 hours worth of stuff, as I remember. Maybe it was only an hour. But,
that was John.
Oh,
and that was John.
Horrible. But that's it. You got to, we were all, punching in the dark, and that was the beauty of it.
There's a shot where Gena comes out the door to the music, when she got her hands in the air, that's the one I don't forget.
Come on, Tony, come on, we'll go around this way and we'll be the chorus one, okay? Come on. Come on, die for Mr. Jensen, okay? Come on, girls, die for Mr. Jensen. Come on, Maria, you know the dying swan. Come on, that's it. Bravo!
Mario Gallo.
Yeah.
Nice man. Good actor, and I've seen him in movies, just like O.G. Dunn, who played Garson Cross.
Tell him we're right in the middle of the party.
Okay, I'll tell him you don't want to talk to him.
Don't tell him that. That's not what I said. Wait a minute. Here, I'll get it. Never mind. I'll get it.
That's Seymour Cassell's son,
Yeah, Matt.
Right there hugging his stage mom.
Matthew Laberteau, who goes on to fame and fortune in television. What was it? Little House on the Prairie.
And there's John Cassavetes that just walked in.
Yeah. Is she the oldest daughter?
Yes.
This is a Davalos, the little girl with her finger in her mouth. That's Richard Davalos' daughter.
A little blonde boy in the back is Pancho Meisenheimer, who's my goddaughter's older brother.
Hello?
So the Davalos girl is the daughter of the actor who played the brother of James Dean's character in East of Eden. And her mother is later on in the film.
Okay.
But it's a great mix of kids, great faces.
We can do our homework.
Well, we could make costumes.
Yay!
You want to make costumes? Okay. All right, Maria, you take the girls up and you put on some eyeshadow and lipstick and some of those crazy, costumes you do. And, Tony, you do the pirate thing with the patch on the eye and some earrings and scarves. You know what ones I mean, don't you? Okay?
Here's the shot that I like.
Yeah.
She starts here, and then we knew she was coming, and she hears the music.
Yeah.
It's just the grace and beauty of this human being that was so special. And that's when I really, I did that pretty well, I thought.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
And I, you were growing day by day because you were given the opportunity, and that's all it is. Because at a certain point, as a cameraman, moving a camera or doing anything, making copper pot, it's repetition. It's when you get the repetition down, the brain knows what to do, that you let your heart go and just just feel it. And I come back to that again and again, but that's what John knew.
Yeah,
how to get people to do.
That's something I do with when I'm mixing. I write down. I know all my essential moves, but I use numbers and color coding on faders and making script notes on the sides that I'm following. So I don't have to think. In other words, I try to get as much thinking out of the way as possible. So when I'm actually mixing, it almost turns into it becomes more zen. I can flow with it more. I don't have to think.
That's what it is.
These kids were just terrified.
Why? Why? This is not your house. Come on, get up, get up. Now get dressed. Don't stand there. Get dressed. Take this off and get dressed. Come on. Put it on. Pick this all up now. Where's your brother John? John?
We only did a couple of takes, I remember,
I don't remember ever belaboring anything.
No.
Everything kind of, they just went, and we went with them.
And we were in sequence, shooting in sequence most of the time.
Yep.
And we'd lay out a few rehearsals and shoot it, sometimes one take, unless he wanted to try it doing something slightly differently. But these children went from really having a good time, really, really playing, and it shows, to terror. They were really frightened, I think.
I don't know.
Certainly not her, not there.
Every now and then, John would, grab the handheld camera if he thought something was missing or if he wanted that particular kind of feel. Although I never knew whether John was going for the feeling or just taking that camera because...
He loved holding that camera. And you know what I love more than anything? Is strapping Nagra over my shoulder with a hand grip Sennheiser mic in my hand and following him, chasing him. Yeah, and anticipating what he was doing and just running along with him, being right there with him when he was in people's faces. That was great. Wonderful. Whether it was a fight or just moving through a crowd or a party sequence, moving with John and his handheld camera. Sometimes I wonder if there was any film in it.
And that was handheld. Now we're back on a Mitchell here, in the corner on a tripod. But coming down the stairs and stuff up the stairs was John handheld.
All right, come on, clean up.
Forget about that. Just get out.
just some of this stuff comes back to you. You remember it because all of a sudden you remember exactly what's going on.
John? Well, come on, where's your shoes?
I can't find them.
Where you going?
Look, I'm fed up with you, your kid, your wife, and your whole family. I'm going to have my kid.
The subject of Peter working with John is an interesting one. We've heard that on Husbands, John was real clear about what he wanted, but Peter was not clear about what he thought John was talking about. So in this film, what did we see that might help clarify any of that? I remember Peter as focused and occasionally when he was relaxed being very bemused, just kind of watching like all of us were what was going on. He did not ask a lot of questions of John. My guess is that whatever his experience on Husbands, he had given himself over to John's talent or his directorial sense in a way where he no longer had to have specifics. Because I never saw Peter ask John anything that would smack of asking for direction. Every now and then you'd look around and you'd see Peter and John kind of having a cigarette together up the street or in the corner of the room. They were clearly talking about something, but they could have been talking about the Lakers. I mean, you know, you just wouldn't know for sure. And I don't remember specifically, this is a general impression, mind you, I don't remember specifically them talking a lot about character.
Don't need your help. Get my own cigarettes. Don't need anybody's help.
I remember Peter would, a lot of times, he wouldn't ask him. Unlike you, I don't remember Peter asking John for direction so much as I think telling John something that he found himself doing. You know, that Nick Longhetti was confused about this. That's why he just sat out in the corner. Or, in other words, he would convey things that he felt himself starting to go through and maybe was very uncertain about them. Maybe he needed confirmation to at least explore that area. And then John would give him that. You know, I don't think John said don't do that. You know, but Peter might say he felt like he should be going off in this direction or that direction. And John might just kind of clear the path. You know?
Redirect him.
Yeah, clear the path. But I found...
But without him knowing that he was directing in any way.
Right. No, he would just, I think, give him confirmation, if anything. He never really lay anything out for him. But I found Peter, I mean, he was obsessed. I mean...
very focused.
Good Lord. I mean, he knew where everything was in that room, you know, and... the first time that he almost scared me, I was putting a wireless microphone on him, and I was down on my hands and knees, and I was making an adjustment or something, and I was reaching up and, you know, putting the wire behind his, you know, buttoning up in his shirt, and he was like mumbling to himself. He was like being this character, and then he was being that character, and he just took off. Yeah. He just took off, walking across the room, and I'm like running, chasing him down on my knees, you know. But it was like for a second there, and he wasn't doing that to be funny.
No,
you know?
he was gone.
He was lost.
He took off.
He was gone. Yeah, and so
he was very quiet. I thought the first weeks or month of shooting, and then kind of you talk to him about things a little bit, just the world and things you wouldn't talk about that had to do with the movies necessarily. But he was really focused, and he'd watch John. And he'd watch everybody. You know, you could tell that he could read people quickly and well, and he knew who he liked, and that was just about everybody. But he was focused.
And very focused and very serious. And I think what John was so wonderful at doing was putting him at ease or applauding him, you know. Like John... It's often said that John was our best audience. He certainly was with me as a musician, composer. He just would get so much delight when I would come up with an idea, he would just almost get watery eyes, same behind the camera, right? How many times you'd see John pull his eye off the eyepiece and just with a big grin on his face.
Look around to find some eye contact to share this with.
Right. Yeah, don't you agree? Isn't this great? Isn't he wonderful? That empowered us all, no matter what you were doing. To me, this is the most memorable evening on the show.
Zep.
Eddie Shaw.
It meant a lot. I remember Eddie now. It meant a lot to him that he could talk to the rest of us and just kind of have a sense of family.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't getting it from John. And I won't say he was out of his depth. I don't know that. And I certainly was trying to achieve any depth at all personally. But when we weren't shooting, he was very sweet, very friendly, and just loved to talk to people and get a sense of them.
Very, very happy to be there. This is Sam Shaw's brother. Sam was our producer, but really our friend and wonderful photographer. And Eddie was also the president of Faces Music, which was John's publishing company. So nearly, everything that we wrote, Eddie published. And John thought he should be Dr. Zepp.
Well, where did I get the idea that he was a New York taxi driver? Is that just one of those that comes down the pike?
Maybe he did it on the weekends.
Who knows? Catherine Cassavetes.
There's a strong lady.
John's adoring mother, who didn't think all that much of the movies he made. Not that she didn't like them, but she didn't know what he was doing or why he was making movies all the time.
I do have anxieties, though. Don't let this woman in my house. The staircase. She's guarding that staircase for me, separate. Up above are my children in my house. Listen. Stop.
Mabel, what's troubling you?
This is the purest creativity.
You said you were upset.
By the time we got into this far into the scene, the crew was pretty well transfixed. I remember all we did was remain focused, reload as fast as we could, and God, you could have heard a pin drop.
There was genuine electricity in the air. No one was doing anything but watching the actors and not just completely focused and waiting for the drama of the next thing that would happen. You couldn't take your eyes off of anyone.
Yeah.
And when we changed the camera setup or moved around, it was done in dead silence.
Yeah, dead silence. Dead silence.
No chatter, nothing, just a purpose.
Sign language.
A quality of let's get this machinery where it's got to be so we can carry this on because we got to know.
Right.
And it was, this went on through this whole sequence. But there it was.
It just got more intense and more intense. And John started pushing a little bit, I think, around here.
But he was, I can't know, but he had to be happy with everything that was happening.
Vodka, on the left there. You make the drinks, Zepp, and I'll watch them.
Doctor? Doctor, aren't you going to give her a shot?
No! No!
Mabel, we're trying to help you.
Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes.
Oh, is that what you're trying to do?
We are
Is that what she's trying to do, Nick?
You be quiet.
We were several hours into the evening around here, and I just noticed that John seemed to be getting a little bit agitated. You know, and I had no idea why he was, because everything seemed to be going so well. I remember we were just all on pins and needles.
How would he manifest that? I mean, how would he show that he was frustrated?
He'd be behind the camera and he'd just take his eye off the eyepiece and look down and just shake his head. And he'd go, bullshit. And I'm like, what is he talking about? Something in the middle of a take, and it became vocal.
Do you love me?
This woman has to go!
I love you.
One of the two times I remember very clearly, this sequence and the climactic sequence at the end of the film, he divided the room up, put a camera on one end, put the other camera at the other end, and let him go. And it was a great thing to do because one camera was tucked away a little further in the corner. You wouldn't really photograph it with a tight lens like this. And then you got other angles from the other camera. And then he let him go, and all we did was kind of follow and focus best we could. And it worked.
That's what he says! Doctor. And last night you brought a man in the house! My son is a good
And it took everything I had to just remain focused on this. And John started, in the middle of a take, he would just go, bullshit. And it just, I don't know about you, but it just sent a tremor through me. It was like horrible. And the scene would keep going.
Yeah,
and even in the beginnings of this, I have 5 points. He'd make a fart noise. And she'd compose herself and keep going. And she finally got to a point where she just was so angry at him, she just stopped and just said, how dare you? You think you can conduct every... And I don't exactly know, because it's a little bit of a blur to me. Because I was in shock, as I think most of the people in the crew on the set were.
I figured it out for me. Us.
Mabel.
One is love. Two is friendship. And three is comfort. And four is I'm a good mother, Nicky.
Mabel, I love you.
I think I just had some unconscious faith in him about what he was doing. I was shocked by some of it because I hadn't seen it before on any movie set. But at the same time, I'd seen a lot of his films, and I knew what he did and what he created worked. And if this was the way, then it had to be, but then it was very new for me. But you see the angles, the camera angles. Earlier, when she's blocking Peter and Zepp, a studio move would be to put the camera on wheels so that you could move around, see them better. But John just let her block them. And would cut around it. And wouldn't block them for long. But the fact that they disappear from view, I think, is part of John's personal film language. He did not care that everything were, just exactly the way a Hollywood movie should be, where you see everything, you see everybody beautifully. You see the back of Zepp's head and his ear. And then out of focus, you see his hand. But maybe when Zepp is looking at it, his eyes are out of focus. I mean, everything that he does is so open to interpretation, which is the great thing about film.
Sit down! I'll knock you right on your ass!
Now, I think at that point, he hit the camera. That's what made that jarring movement. Most people would redo that. John just used it. He backed right up, his elbow, his arm, shoulder, hit the camera. And he blocked the camera completely. So there was, couple of seconds of complete black there. John left it in.
Well, again, his primary thing was the emotion and the reality, a set of reality. And nothing technical was going to get in the way.
I won't hurt you. My God, I'm part of this family.
Including the fact that she's not in focus in any of this until she gets back to the mantle, the fireplace. We were fighting to find the focus. The focus puller did a very good job to keep on her as well as he did. But somehow that it doesn't blur to where she's mush. It's just out enough to make you feel something. Everybody's used to seeing everything crystal clear and sharp. And there's a place for that, but somehow it didn't belong in John's movies, or at least in this sequence. Yeah. Or if it was there, it wasn't enough to stop what he was doing. But look, see, they close in on her, and there's one camera. Because the camera is moving, it isn't the same. It somehow imprisons her. And they hover around, and they close in. One gets on his knees, the other... I mean, I've always said that he invented his own personal film language. When he would grab the handheld camera, he would move in so close that the camera was incapable of focusing. But that was pure emotion, because over that were the words, over that were the people you had come to know where you didn't need to see them. Okay. And it just blurred reality for a beat or three, and it just created something you didn't get anywhere else.
And right about here is where Eddie, Dr. Zepp, lost it, I think. He thought she was really going.
That's the impact of this film. People who saw it when it first came out thought she was really going.
Which I did, I'm sorry, but so what? What's the difference? I love you. Now relax. Come back to me.
I mean, it's impossible to see this and not believe she isn't absolutely going over the edge.
Right.
And that's the incredible magic. Only we know that at the end of this day, probably went off and had a tall glass of wine or whatever her preference was and went home to her kids. But, you know.
When this sequence was over, Eddie was standing over by the window.
Look at him.
Fireplace. I know.
He's beat up.
I went over to him, and he was just, he was exhausted, and he was crying. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he says, I thought she was gone. I thought she was really going. And I just left him alone. That's the kind of evening that was.
You cannot take this. Don't take the children. I'm not mad at you. Please, I understand.
Please, let me handle this.
Yes, I know, but
Let me handle this.
This is in a centerpiece sequence, along with the climactic finale. You know, this is I don't know, the end of Act 2, or I don't know if you can divide this film the way I try to into Acts 1, 2, and 3, but maybe 4 or 5 or 6. And there they are in the bed again. The doctor's on the bed, the kids are on the bed. All she wants to do is keep her kids close.
And you see that bus sequence was at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, right. And he stands right in front of her.
Such betrayal.
Yeah. This is an area that we shot in where the Getty Museum now resides.
Is that what that is? That
yeah. This is where it was. This is where we went, and of course there was nothing here. It was the pass. What is it? The Coinga Pass. Mm-hmm. The way we get to the valley and into the west side and Westwood, and UCLA, and all that. And it was 1972. And there were no thoughts of putting a huge museum with, all of that concrete. So we used this, and this is the sequence came out of it. This was fun for us because we were outdoors, and that's where that picture of the three of us is taken. Remember?
Yeah.
John behind the camera and
right.
you
Mitchell
and me.
Bright, you and me and John in the back of that pickup. That was my truck. I drove that through the whole production. That thing, and you'll see me there in a second. Right there, you see that little microphone sticking up at the bottom?
No,
Into
I
frame?
didn't see it. No.
That's in the front seat on the floor.
You were?
Yeah. If you look, the little windscreen popped up there just for a second.
It's hard to separate your personal subjective relationship with John, because I think everyone had one, from and look at it objectively to discourse on what he felt toward everybody. But I just keep coming back to family. He made a family. He made me part of his family. He treated me like a friend and a son, and he gave me things. He gave me instructions. He gave me specifics. He teased with me. He kidded with me. He competed with me. He was like a brother and a father, and all in the best sense of the word. He did that with anybody on the set that he liked, and I don't think there were very many people that were not included in that. I believe that the conflict on this film, which wasn't a big one, occurred in the beginning, and when John saw it clearly for what he felt it was. And
what was that?
That was the AFI camera crew
right.
leaving after a couple, 3 weeks. He everything just became harmonious. I mean, I think he felt that they didn't fit in, and that it did not help the energy on the film, because there was conflict, and there were conflict between crew members as a result of it. He did what he had to do to eliminate that. So once that happened, we all fell into a pleasant harmony. There was plenty of time for fun on the set. We've described some very serious, moods and moments, and they were there. But the sequence is built from discovering the characters and their humor and fun things, and it just took a slow build to the drama. He was a very giving, outgoing, spontaneous, funny individual who I remember so much for what he did for us and who he was. And I may see it somewhat through rose-colored glasses, but the truth is he was very human and he was very generous. And I think there's no one who knew him who wouldn't say that in their own way.
Yeah, it's incredible that he had so much to spread around, because it seemed like he spent a lot of time with me. But then again, he spent a lot of time with you, and he spent a lot of time with her, and he spent a lot of time, and it was genuine time. It was joy. He really enjoyed the gang. It was like whenever he invited me to come along on a project with him, there was a sense of excitement, like he was like a 10-year-old kid. We were 10-year-old kids, and he'd look at me and he'd go, hey, come on, you want to go do this thing? You want to go down this trail? You want to go rob this bank? You want to go, And I was felt like I was writing with him, like I wrote with Billy the Kid or something. That was the joy and the family sense of family that I got. John, to me, also was like, I didn't realize this till much later on, that he was kind of my male mentor, I guess. He was the older man in my life that looked at me, that I admired, that said, "You're wonderful, and you can do anything," and I could, I could do things. I was a sound mixer on a film that I couldn't do. I played a piano and did stuff that I told him I couldn't do, and invented stuff that I didn't think I was capable of even imagining, So it was a grand celebration of family, and we were a gang.
Thank you very much, Miss.
Miss Hinson, I'm the school principal.
There was nothing aloof about John. I mean, he never affected a stance because he thought that it would help his leadership. He just was there. He was one of us. If you look at Gena and the way she becomes part of the kids in the sequence where they're in the backyard playing, that's the way John was. He was part of the gang. He was just himself, and himself was a leader, but by example, and his example was to have fun as much as work.
Right.
And having fun, I think, was essential.
Well, you could tell how much he loved us by the way he acted, too, you know? He laughed and giggled and rolled around the floor and challenged you to an arm wrestle or go play, throw the football or something like that. Whereas if he had to go to Universal and go talk to some, studio heads, he was somebody else. It would amaze me how he could change. And relatively quickly, we could be in my music room, toying with a piece of music. Just the two of us on a very, kind of an intimate level. He didn't write music. He was tone deaf. I didn't, I was just had a knack for melodies and sang a little bit. And we would get together and we'd come up with these wonderful ideas. And it was exciting because it was pure. And he showed me, kind of gave me an idea of what it was like to have a little bit of courage, to be free, loosen me up like I could never write lyric. And to see him just spout things out, just nothing would get in the way, was really inspiring. And then secretary would knock on the door and say, so-and-so's on the phone, and he'd, I got to go, and he'd take off. And from the time it took him to walk from my music room down the hall to his office, he turned into this person who could throw a studio head off balance. And I guess that's what made him a really great director. He could change modes, And
he got that from his acting as well.
He was a great actor.
Up here, we'll drop down right here. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Hey, Nick, I'm usually a lot of fun, right? But to see a guy like Eddie fall and break all his bones, holy shit, what a fall.
All right, knock it off, will you? We're here to have a good time. We're having a good time. We came to play with the kids.
Day at the beach.
Mm-hmm. This might have been one of the first times that I had to use wireless microphones. I remember that was kind of scary because I had one on Vito Grimaldi and one on Nick Longetti here, and they were crapping out. One would crap out, and I was having to take Peter's voice off of the other guy's mic, so it was a little bit not one of my better days, and I think I hate wireless microphones to this day. You can't rely on them.
Dig deep and get the... Don't worry about it.
This is a sequence I know people always ask about. And the truth is that these kids didn't have to act when they got out of the truck. They were pretty much under their own influence. I vaguely remember something about opening a can or two and putting apple juice in. If it happened here, it was never used.
Yeah.
For some reason, when the scene got going, out came the beer, and you can see it's not apple juice. I mean,
right.
It's foaming like it's supposed to, and the kids are, having a day with Pop.
We're just sitting in the back of the truck there. I had the Naga in my lap, and those aren't pieces of string or twine on the ground. I had microphone cables going up everybody's leg, and they were wearing little lavalier mics. And it's basically all I could do. And
you mentioned it to John. What did he say?
Well, I thought maybe we could frame it out, or maybe if we were going to be tight enough. And he just didn't care. He said it's rope.
That's right.
And he really just didn't care. The thing that was on his mind was the emotion and the intention of the scene. And
but I love how the little girl, she tastes the beer, spits it out. The boys, however, they got to carry on, so they drink it.
Too drunk. But you know, a little beer is good. You sleep like rocks.
John could best be described as someone who didn't know that he couldn't do anything. So he went ahead and did it.
Yeah.
He didn't understand that he couldn't. So most of us, put our own limitations on our abilities, but he didn't. And as a result, he was very unique. I tried to share it with everybody that I knew who would appreciate it. I mean, on Chinese Bookie, I brought in Mike Stringer, who had gotten me my first job in the business. I think on A Woman and again on Chinese Bookie, Gary Graver was there. And John liked these guys because they cared about making films. And he could read it and loved their humor and their qualities. He gave us things. We tried to give things to people that we knew that shared it. And it just, made a great pyramid after a while.
It's funny how that's all handed down. It's how it's sort of like the first time you met John. Somebody handed you.
That's right.
Seymour handed you.
Seymour gave me John. I'd been in the service and I spent 2 years in New York, and I'd come out here. I'd seen every John Cassavetes movie that had been made, and I'd seen Minnie and Moskowitz 13 times. And I'm driving up to prepare for a movie, and I look over, and there's Seymour driving on his Triumph motorcycle, ponytail, walrus mustache. So I yelled out, "Hey, Seymour!" And Seymour, being Seymour, stopped his bike and pulled over, and we started talking, and he was the friendliest, most open. And when I said, I'd give anything to work on a John Cassavetes movie, he looked at me and said, "Well, he's getting ready to start one. Why don't you call him up?" I said, "Well, how would I do that? Here's the number." He wrote the number out. I ran home, got on the phone, and someone answered, and she said, "Hello, Faces." And I said, "Yeah, this is Mike Ferris. I'm a friend of Seymour Cassell. Could you please let me talk to John?" "Yeah, hold on." "Yeah, this is John." And that was it. He invited me to come over at the CBS studios where he had offices. And I showed up there. He was dictating, presume, a script. Over in the corner is Peter Falk making pencil sketches that were just fabulous, and Ben Gazzara with a cigar. He stopped what he was doing, came over, shook my hand, just introduced me to everybody like a long-lost friend, and then took me into the back in a closed office, sat behind the desk, pulled out a script almost 2.5 inches, 3 inches thick, threw it across the desk, and began to explain the story of a woman under the influence. Took him about an hour and a half. And that was it. I mean, I was a part of the gang from there on. And anytime anyone has ever asked me, how did I get in the business? What do you do? How do you go about it? Do you think? I stop what I'm doing to the best of my ability, and I take time for that person, and I look them dead in the eye, and I give them the best answers that I know how. And you can ask my wife how many times I've invited new filmmakers or new people that I've met to the house. It's something John did that you got to give back. And it's wonderful. And they need as much help as we needed. And John got his breaks, and it just carries on.
Well, once again, this is was intended to be a temp piece of music off my idea tape. It was for the 6 months later, and my singular voice I heard as a bunch of men singing in unison, like arm in arm, walking down the street, like an anthem. And so that was just the melody. I guess, to my utter shock, John fell in love with that as is, and that ended up in the film. It's a little bit dry, but again, John fell in love with it as it is.
How did Peter get that hat?
Well, that's something that John just ran out in the middle of I think we were even rolling.
In the beginning of the show. Right?
Yeah, and plopped it on his head. And at the time, I thought it was like one of his ploys when he was trying to get an actor to try something different way by asking him to hold a watermelon while they were doing the scene or something. He put this hat on Peter, but it wasn't that. It worked. It fit, and I don't know.
Peter loved it.
Do you remember where was that? Where'd that happen?
Yeah, I think it was the beginning of the film, and it just worked.
Oh yeah, it's like
where
glue.
It came from.
He never took it off.
No, he never takes it off except in the end, or when he's in bed. But you could just see John, leaving the garage or getting in his car and looking up and seeing that and grabbing it. Who knows how it came to be.
That men's unison singing segued into this very linear piece of piano, which was going to be piano and orchestra that went into the main theme of Woman of the Influence.
The beginning of the final act. Another sequence in a film that is highly unusual in my experience. You invite everyone to a party, they just get there, and you ask them to go home. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I had never seen things like this, and I'm repeating myself, but it's just, to me, it's the essence of what John Cassavetes did. He just made everything so human, that so human events on the screen.
It's also another piece of magic that happened in here. We had perfect weather, and
the whole show.
And it rained on this day that we wanted rain, as I remember it.
Yeah, it rained, and John went outside, and he got dressed up in rain gear and photographed handheld, and so did we. But he did a lot of stuff out on the yard, and and it rained all day. It could have been one of those rainstorms that came and went, but it rained all day, and we shot all day in it. It gave a real mood.
Hey, Nick.
Hi, you're,
Victor's wife. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How are you? Jesus Christ.
My involvement in Woman Under the Influence was about a 2-year involvement. I came on early, and he put me to work in the cutting room when they were finishing up Husbands. I think they just got the cover of Time magazine, and John had decided to, rather than releasing the film, to Columbia's dismay, went back to the cutting room for about another 6 months. So I did a little bit of music on Minnie and Moskowitz, and when Woman Under the Influence came around, he brought me in early, and he said he wanted me to do the music for it. And I was elated. He said, I want you to do it on piano. And I said, well, I don't play piano. He says, rent one. So Peter gave me his dressing room out at Universal where he was doing Columbo. And we got a piano in there, and I started playing piano and working on the theme. And I got about 4 or 5 weeks, I think, into teaching myself how to play piano while writing the theme for a woman here. And he came out one day and said, "Look, I'm not sure if this man that I've got doing the sound on the picture. You look, Bo, you record all your own music. One tape recorder is like another. Why don't you can do the sound for it?" I said, "That I can't." I said, "You're out of your mind. I have no idea what to do." He says, "You can do it. You got 3 weeks." So I segued out of music for a while and went and rented a Nagra tape recorder and ran around town asking a lot of questions. and got a gentleman, Nick Spalding, for a boom operator who'd done some mixing before. And that's basically how I got started mixing.
Yes. I love Mabel.
I know you do. I love Mabel. You think this is all right, all these people here?
Yes.
You don't think it's too much?
You really want to know what I think? You're a shit.
John usually led me to believe that we were going to go into the studio and re-record or arrange a lot of the music. And a lot of times he just flatly talked me out of it. Or, like in films like Opening Night and Killing of a Chinese Bookie, I had more produced music. In other words, I did take a lot of it into the studio. However, he'd throw me a curve during the final mix of the film when we were in there mixing all the dialogue and the music and the effects tracks. During the final mix, I was usually present, and we'd be going over a scene and setting all the levels, and John would look at me, and he'd look at me and go, Bo, I don't know about this cue here. It's just, I don't know. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I don't know. The original piece of music you had in there just had something, and I says, oh, no, don't. He says, and he'd go, Buzz, put up the B music track, and he would always have my original idea up on a B music track. And he'd put it up, and he said, "Now let's hear that. Just Bo, just bear with me here. Let's." And we'd watch the scene with the original tent music in it, and he'd get that look on his face and shake his head with that smile and go, "Isn't that great?"
I know it's wrong. I can't do it. Can't tell him not to go.
Okay.
You do it. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mama, you want me to do it?
I'll do it.
The response to the film was incredible. We moved from the American Film Institute to these offices above the Wilshire Theater on Wilshire Boulevard near La Cienega. And we had like 12, 14 offices on the second floor, which was right over the theater that we opened in. And the great thing was we could go downstairs during the day and sit in the audience. And it was a great lesson for me because the 2 o'clock screening could have laughter and crying, and the 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock screening, nobody moved. And it was the same movie, same theater. And it just showed me how rooms change, the audiences change from performance to performance. The critical acclaim was over the top. I mean, we got very, very good reviews. A lot of people didn't know what to think of it. I think for me, the most memorable moment over the 2.5 years I was working on A Woman Under the Influence, and it was hard. I mean, if John could give us $60 or $70 a week, he would, and sometimes we got nothing. But it was an exciting 2.5 years, and it was a hard 2.5 years. Our credit at certain labs was cut off, so we had a lot working against us. My payoff, more than anything, was one evening. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were up in our offices, and we had just been nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Director, and Gena got a nomination for Best Actress. And I was in John's office, and his window opened up into a fire escape that was about 10 feet from the marquee of the theater marquee. And he opened the window and threw a couple of furniture pads out there, got a bottle of cognac and a couple of glasses, and we crawled out on the fire escape. And it was just starting to get dark outside. I was looking down at the people lining up to our movie, and he poured a couple of glasses of cognac and gave me one, and we clinked the glasses, and he looked at me and kind of looked out over the city and just said, fuck 'em. And he didn't mean fuck 'em like, like the people that come to the theater. It was just like all this stuff that we were up against. Everybody had said we couldn't do it, or we shouldn't be doing it, or we weren't doing the right thing. And it was just a nice moment to sit there, and I'd probably never felt closer to him.
are you, sweetie? Take care, honey.
Whatever you want. I think what? You
Hurry
want?
up. See, honey, baby.
Hi, Mabel. I know you don't know me, honey, but I'm a friend of Nick's, Vito. You know Vito. Ramondi, I'm Mary, his wife. And if you anything you need, just let me know. Please let me know. Really wet out here. Oh, Mabel, darling, you look wonderful. God love you. You look terrific. I love you, sweetheart.
I remember thinking that the Academy Awards were, the nominations were, because it was a non-union picture and because the politics were so strong in those days, there was no way that the Academy was going to nominate or give any independent non-union picture shot in Hollywood their due. And the very fact that they nominated Gena and John was, to me, in my mind, tantamount to getting the awards. I mean, the other performances that year were good, but there was never anything like this film before or since. So anybody who cared about film knew where the awards belonged. And those nominations said everything.
Mabel, you look fine. Rested. I'm so happy to see you, darling. Oh. Are you hungry? Would you want something to eat?
No.
No? Well, will you say your hellos to everybody?
You saw
all the
Nick?
people. Nick.
I'm very happy to see you, Mabel. Must have been hard. Sorry to have been the one to have done the committing. But I know that you know that it was the best thing. So I hope we can be friends.
I hope you don't hold it against me. I'm the one that sent you up the river. It's just so great. But this is the beginning of the final sequence, and this is probably the toughest sequence for anybody in the audience or anybody. This whole film is just, how turned upside down everything gets and what it takes to resolve it again.
Speech is short because I'm very, very hungry, and I'm sure you must be hungry to see you.
Okay, Adele. We're all going to eat.
You look great. You really look
how do you
good.
do? I'm Mabel's mother, and this is Father George.
She looks wonderful. Wonderful.
She does look
My favorite part of this whole thing, like I said earlier, was I had a Nagra over my shoulder, and I was running around next to John with his hand held airy, right there in everybody's face. It was thrilling for me.
He's hungry.
Let's see if we can find a
Well,
cup
of
of
course
coffee.
you're hungry, and we'll do something about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think the young people think enough about how important food is.
Could I see the
They
children?
go about eating like birds.
That's right.
Watch it, wait a minute. Go in there, they're going to start to cry. You're going to start to
Like
cry.
going out
Everybody's going
dry.
to get so emotional. Nothing is better. Sweetie.
I've got to see the children.
See, you know what?
Yes, you can see them.
Where are they?
They're in there. Go ahead, dear. Go in.
It'll be
Why shouldn't she see the
You think
children?
she looks good.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. I love you, Mom.
John didn't rehearse. He may occasionally have done something, but in the standard Hollywood procedure of rehearsing, never. It was just go. They came rehearsed, and they learned who they had to be. And if there was a problem, and occasionally it happened, then he would run through things again, or they might read lines. John would demonstrate things. I have photographs of him showing how he, OG should dance with Gena, and he would dance with her. But they didn't rehearse. They rehearsed on film.
Not really. I mean, maybe there was some kind of a vague blocking rehearsal, so we knew that they were going to be in this area. We were shooting in this area.
Yeah,
but
we knew that.
But isn't that funny, though, that there really wasn't a lot of rehearsing? The actors were supposed to know who they were, and they'd had long discussions with John, but my gosh, no, not rehearsals like I know today.
No, they're nothing like what you would see on any studio stage or any place. We all just lived it as it happened, basically.
But I'll tell you, it's not like it's the actors are not getting off easy by that. They had to do their homework. I mean, you know, when you come on the set, you better know your lines, and you better know who you are.
You better
because
know
he's not going to answer a whole lot of questions for you, right?
Yeah. And this sequence, as it progresses, the tension gets higher and higher, and Gena came. I mean, this is practically toward the end of the film. I can't remember how long it took us to shoot this, but she asked John directly and in public, in public meaning in front of all of us, what he thought that Mabel might do at this point. And he absolutely refused to listen to her. And she got angry in it, and he wouldn't give her any room to move or to breathe emotionally, which in retrospect, looking back on it, you could see he had a perfectly good reason for that, but it tormented her. And she started to have what I consider a family fight in front of us. Well, we were all family by then, so we've all experienced it, I would assume. And she said, it just built and built, and she finally said, if I had a knife right now, I'd put it right through your heart. You're a vampire. You just won't tell me any. All I'm asking, John, and this went on and on. He'd walk away, he'd light a cigarette, he'd go in another room. Or when at the beginning of it, he would say, Gena, why would you ask me that? Why would you ask me? I know nothing compared to you. I'm standing here, you're going to show me, you're going to tell me. I mean, I'm paraphrasing him, but that's the general thrust of what he would do.
You know all the answers.
How could you ask me? I'm a child compared to you. I mean, and she would not buy that 100% from him. She wanted some help, and she had not asked for any help at any point. So my sense of it was that she felt she had a right to a little guidance. She needed a little guidance. And from her life's partner, she wanted it, and he wouldn't give it to her. Refused, walked away, turned his back. And she, out of that, came more and more of Mabel, more and more of what this scene turns into. Mm-hmm. And that's all John wanted. And
you're on your own, Cookie.
You're on your own, Cookie. And she, it died down, but the tension was heavy. And he'd say, 10 minutes would go by and other things would go on. And he'd say, all right, let's roll this. Let's quit talking. Let's go. Roll it. And boom, the rest happened. And that happened in the sequence that's upcoming here as things get tense between Peter and Gena, or Nick and Mabel Longetti. And that stays with me because that was John directing, walking away.
And looking back on it now, I can see where possibly that helps an actor own their character, right?
I think. All I know is the final product is in front of us. So whatever John's instincts were, they were incredible, and he stuck with them and made people crazy. But, out of the torment comes the art.
Go sit with your mother.
Fred Draper, this gentleman playing Jena's father, is a wonderful actor, a very good, very professional actor. The level of Peter, or he was in Faces, if I recall. And I remember how well his character stood out for me, with very few lines and very, not a lot to do, but the impression between their relationship, Gena and her father, Fred, it was huge. You could just feel the history of their years. And that's just the quality of John's casting. When you look at this group, you realize John has created a foundation by locking in some of the best actors in America at the time, Gena and Peter, and then surrounded them with amateurs and let, the chips fall where they may, and emotionally they fall into A Woman Under the Influence.
me a bebe. Give me another bebe. Give me a better bebe. Oh, a real bebe. Come on.
Now, technically, there's no light anywhere on them. There's background for contrast, and you can see them silhouetted. But John is sitting on the middle of the stairs. They're sitting a stair or two below him, and he's photographing them. That's why it goes a little soft. There's nobody to help him until they get there. And, I mean, that scene's incredible. And I think it's a combination of the way it looks visually and just hearing Peter say, give me a baba, give me the old gal, you know, reverting to his only thing he knows, get her emotion back, get the gal that he loves back.
Hello, Tony.
Hi, Tony. Hi, Tony. Hi.
And of course, always got to be, just like in a Western, you got to have a river crossing or a cattle stampede. In a John Cassavetes movie, you got to have people eating at a table. You know, you got to have family and breaking bread and, you know, doing what they do. So he has one at the beginning and he has one at the end.
Yeah, but this one I'd like to shoot everybody at the table.
But you can't.
No, I wouldn't.
They're your family. I mean, we all feel that way a little bit about people in our lives. That's what makes, I think, these films so extraordinary, and why I never felt like that, because there was fighting in my family. I mean, not a lot, but there was enough for me to know what it was. And as I grew up, I kind of understood, you know, adults had certain rules, kids had certain rules, and you could see the love through all of the anger and frustration if you were in fact loved. And that's what appeals to me about all of John's movies is anger or frustration, pain, terrible behavior. It's all about love. And, you know, he's said that himself many times. It's quite clear. But it's so effective that it just, you know, lifts me off my feet.
Right, Zep?
Right on.
Right, Adolf?
Absolutely so.
You see? I mean, no sense talking about the past. The past is the past. That's dead. Forget about that.
I mean, what you're expressing is, I think, what we have to recognize about human beings. None of us know what the hell we're doing. I mean, people don't know what the hell they're doing. You know? I mean, that's why we're looking for leaders all the time, or that's why we fumble around and figure it out either when it's too late or when we finally get hit over the head enough times. And it's all in these movies. You can see them.
Gina's preparing some things in the kitchen, if you'd like.
I'm going to go in there a minute.
Right here in the foreground on the left, the older gentleman
is Nick Cassavetes, John's dad.
I mean, that's his mother and father. The characterization in this movie, John's mother, she doesn't have a husband as far as we know. This is Adolf, who is a friend of the family, but she identifies him in the party sequence. So, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4 Cassavetes friends and family members in the scene. Matt Cassell being, you know, Seymour's boy.
Did you see Tina's ass? Nick, that ass is, I've never seen anything so, her ass is this big.
She's talking about how big her butt is.
Hurt Tina's feelings by talking about her ass.
It's okay. I do have a big ass. I wish I had some.
Well, there's nothing.
The lady putting glasses on the table, her professional name was Elizabeth Deering, and she was Seymour Cassell's wife, and that's her son, just out of frame behind Gena, who's Matt, who plays their oldest child. You know, it's, again, a family affair.
I wish you'd all go home.
Oh, we came for a party. We'd like to stay for a party.
Nick and I want to go to bed together.
Oh, now, Mabel, darling, the children are here. Don't talk like that.
Let me start over. Hello, Dad.
Hi, honey.
Hello, Mama.
Hello, darling. Now, take it easy, won't you?
Hello, Tina. Hello, Mama.
Hi, Mabel.
Bo was a free spirit when I met him. He's a free spirit now. We've all grown a lot over the years, but Bo really stood by my side as a friend from the first day I met him. He didn't ask questions. He just, like John, he knew me from his gut instinct, liked me, and we just became friends. And I responded to him the same way. And we just, you know, we worked on the movies all through the 70s. And for me, at the end of opening night, John came to me and said, look, Jen is tired of me putting up the house every time or this, that. We're going to do a union picture in New York, and we're going to, you know, that'll be the next show we do. But he took the time to tell me that, and that was Gloria that they went to do. And for me, that was the end of my time with John specific. I then went and got into the union because I had turned it down or refused it or turned away from it all during this era because I wasn't going to have anybody telling me I couldn't work for John Cassavetes. But when it was over, I jumped on the train because that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to work with, I wanted to learn it all. And I think Bo, what I'm leading up to and mentioning that for is because I don't know where you went for a couple of years. So we didn't see each other for a few years, and then we got back together. We've been friends, you know. We make the effort to see each other regularly over the years.
Yeah, Mikey, we're like brothers, and we're pals. And pals go to Dodger games together, and they go to boxing matches, and they smoke cigars together.
Once a year on February 3rd, we go to the gravesite.
Right.
John Cassavetes.
We go to
together.
Westwood, and we meet about 8:15 in the morning and sit by our pal's grave there and tell stories.
Tell stories
to each other. And it seems like they're new every year, but I know they're not. But we sit there and we laugh and we cry for a couple of hours, and then we go off to Moustache or some nice restaurant and have a really nice breakfast. And those are most of our February 3rds. That's what happens in the morning, but that's become a tradition.
All right, that's the end of the jokes. Sit down. That's the end of the jokes.
I can't say enough times how much he's given us and continues to do. I mean, he has made not friends out of just Bo and I. Every now and then, Bo and I will have somebody else will be around, and we'll invite them to the gravesite, and they'll come and they'll tell stories of their own. John was just someone who created stories about him because he was unique and different, and he generated stories. And so we get a different perspective every now and then. But the truth is that Bo and I have a perspective, I think, over the years, 30 plus, that is kind of unique. And we have a language, we don't have to talk about it, but we do because it makes us smile.
Yeah. We were there scrubbing the floors together, and there's not a in those 30 years, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of John, and I'm just grateful to have had that man in my life. I don't know quite how it all came about, but it created a great friendship between Mikey and me.
Go ahead. Simple talk.
Dad, will you stand up for me?
Sure.
Oh, I don't mean that. Sit down, Dad.
the number of people, when they find out you've worked with them, they just come out of the woodwork. They want to know things. They've heard. I was with Seymour at Christmas, and there was a woman there who had heard all the stories, and she looked at me about 1:30 in the morning, and she said, I would have given anything to have known him. And that's the kind of effect he's had on people. They can sense something so special that it's a tangible emotion in them when they were nowhere near him. They see pictures and they see his films. We were there, and it was a gift.
Which is so uncanny is that, to me, John was basically not that complicated. He was just a man of vision and bullheaded and completely uncompromising. And I think anybody who spent any more than a week or two around him was profoundly changed or profoundly affected. Basically, he talked in simple terms, and but he had a great effect.
Oh, Mabel, please calm down. Mabel, please.
Mabel, get down off that couch or I'll pull you down.
At this point, now that particular shot, the camera was obviously still in the room. But here, once everyone clears out, we take a break, meaning just the time it takes, and we replace the cameras, as I mentioned earlier, in the other room. And that begins to unfold. But once they leave, once Catherine gets out and the other actors leave, we reset the cameras in the living room and down the hall so you could see what was going on, and things just unfolded again.
Get out. Please get out.
Keep in mind, there's no sense of keeping a screen direction, which is the law in filmmaking, that people have to look at each other. They have to look in the right direction. The camera can't cross certain lines at certain times. Well, none of that mattered to John. So there's a sense of complete freedom. And the argument is it confuses people. I beg to differ. People know where they are. And so here we go with this scene, and we started it close, tight lenses, and we just followed the action. And you can see at this point, we had gotten reasonably good at what we were doing. This is handheld, and this is all John's handheld footage here. Now we're back into the stationary cameras to a certain point.
Mama, please.
This is handheld up above.
Mom, what's the matter, Mom?
And I believe Peter comes down the stairs, yeah.
Mom, I don't understand. Mom, I don't understand. Mom?
Everything else, I believe, till they put the kids to bed, happens down here. 2 cameras.
Stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing.
Down low. Most cameras will try to maintain a eye level. That's why they boom up and down. It's just considered to be more attractive. These cameras were planted in one place and stayed there. And if you shot up at them, so be it. And if the kids were down low or somebody dropped to their knees, you just followed them. You'll see the light in the corner is very bright. It's got a photo flood in it, and it gives the light to the room overall. It's not nuanced or in any way filtered or changed to be realistic looking. It's just hot. And the same in this room. There's an overhead lamp and a lamp by the bed. And they have photo floods in them instead of studio lights. Now, these cameras were at the perfect level for the kids at that point. But then you look up at Peter when he gets close. If memory serves, that her falling was handheld. Yeah, all this is handheld.
Sound-wise, I had, most of the time I had, just for safety backup, I had a wireless microphone on Gena and Peter. I had mics planted in the foyer, 2 in the foyer, 2 in the stairwell, and the booms were covering the living room and part of the foyer. So it just, I was moving all over the place. Again, trying not to use the wireless microphones unless I had to. But again, this kind of stuff, well, the whole movie was pretty much seat of my pants. Without rehearsals and all that kind of stuff, you better be plugged in.
There are very few Hollywood actresses who would allow you to photograph up her nose like that. It just isn't done. And, of course, it's obvious at this point it's not about glamour or anything else. It's about performance, but these are the things we learned later. So I guess we kind of started at the top and worked our way ever so slowly to the next level of the top, or wherever we are. I've made some nice Hollywood movies. I made a movie called My Life with Michael Keaton and Nicole Kidman, written by Bruce Joel Rubin, and it's really a story about family. Man is dying, and he videotapes his life for his son, who is coming, who isn't born yet, and requires him to go back to his family and seek a rapprochement between his father, who he hasn't spoken to in years. And those films, rare as they are, the ones that remind me of working with John, and gave me the greatest sense of working on films for a very worthwhile purpose. Teach all of us about life, help us to see what it is so that we can survive it ourselves. It makes me proud to be able to look at this as a foundation for those experiences.
I love you.
One thing that, as an operator, John gave me is there are very few off-the-cuff kinds of ad-lib scenes anymore that can fool me. I just go with the flow. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake, you fix it. But that attitude, you make less mistakes. All of this is back on what I call a studio mode. Big Mitchell cameras housed in soundproof on tripods or on a dolly, not moving, but big old things that keep the camera absolutely still and let the actors do their thing.
I'm fine. I'm happy, Fran.
Okay, I love you too.
I believe that. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Okay.
In one light, watching his movies is pretty much the way our rough cuts sounded. We didn't do a lot of fixing, certainly no looping. Sometimes I would shoot a wild track, which is an actor saying the hello, how are you line without the camera running after we've shot it. Say if something got in the way, I'd grab it wild. And we did it right away so the actor had the same energy and timing, more than likely we could drop it in. That's as far as we came to doing any ADR or looping. He just really wanted the real McCoy. He didn't want to bring an actor in the studio, and I don't know if he ever did. I'm sure he did, but I don't know. I was never with him. If there was a little camera noise, or if actually there's a lot of times where we could have fixed stuff in the editing room. A good sound editor could have made some fixes where the sound is really dry because a wireless microphone was just doing everything. We could have, fattened it out a little bit or something. We didn't do some of that, and some of that bothers me even today. But again, it just goes to show what was important to John. John was like a painter. It worked for him. He saw it. He felt the reality and the honesty and the love that he was trying to get. And that's all that matters to him. If it isn't slick and perfect, too bad. Matter of fact, if it was, maybe we'll rough it up a little bit. A lot of times when you're cutting from one camera angle to another, room tones will shift. And in a final mix, you'll overlap sound and crossfade cuts. So you'll smooth out the room tone shifts. But sometimes he just didn't care about that too much. I mean, there was a little bit of that when we did the final mix, smoothing out the cuts and stuff. But you're basically listening to some really raw sound. It's the way he preferred it. The way he preferred the music. He liked my original ideas. And I can talk till I'm blue in the face about, oh, well, here my voice is implied orchestration. Or here my voice is men singing in unison. Or here my voice is Gena humming. And the piano is really this or it's really that. Well, that's the way I heard it. And the way it came out and went down on tape is what you've got here. And that was just fine with John.
Let me see that hand.
I think I was just so tired,
Well, I can tell you my reaction is, it's very optimistic. They'll go on being the Longhettis until they're Adolf and Catherine's age and older, and they'll die in each other's arms. That's the way I see it. This has just been a day in the life, or 6 months, or a year in the life of some very human people. If they've survived this and resolved the issue of her going away and coming back, there ain't too much more that can happen to them that's going to separate them. And in all relationships, I find history and time and commitment grows out of your experience. And the more they have together, stronger is their bond. They may be completely opposite as people. I mean, men and women, this is a classic battle. But these two people love each other, whatever it is, a kernel or all with their whole being. But they're staying together, and they're raising their kids, and there'll be more fights and more, crazy energy, but it'll be theirs and their way. And just one more adjustment that they've made to each other.
I just basically felt that these two people were going to go on, stumbling as we stumble, loving as we love. I call this piece of music a Pete Kazoo. John and I talked about the end of the film, and my voice in the beginning is like Peter's voice, boom, boom, boom. But yet it's joyous, and it's when I go to the chorus, if you listen really hard, I kicked over I had film cans and stuff piled up next to my guitar amp and piano, and I kicked them over every time I went into a chorus. Which to me was just the chaos that these two kick up, and they're going to continue kicking up. But also there's a sense of joy and undisputable love between the Longhettis.
No question about it. It's my favorite piece in the film, this music. And it's completely optimistic.